Everybody, welcome to Our World Today, the Unionist Perspective, our live discussions where we talk about the news in a different way. Very happy to be with you after a week break. And we have some things to talk about for the newbies. We talk about politics and social things, climate change, entertainment, demographics. We talk about a lot of things basically, and we'd love to have your views on them. So if you want to chat while we are doing that, please do so in the comments of the live discussions or in the comments on YouTube if you're watching from YouTube. So basically, today I want to talk about elections. We want to talk about elections. There are a lot of them happening around the world at the moment or in the near future. And we just want to ground the energy because it's a very high, very intense energy. Maybe you feel like a little bit of anxiety talking about politics because it is such a sensitive topic. And yeah, we'll just start with that. First of all, we were like four of us were in the United States and in the same city at the same time for a week. So um, it led to a lot of exchanges on cultures and things like that. And I realized driving into Michigan that there's a lot of how can I say? There's a lot of it I don't know or that it feels very distant to me as a European or as a non-US citizen in the presidential elections. And first of all, I've heard a little bit, maybe once, that there was a Kennedy Jr. candidate somewhere, but I don't know more about that. So I really like to have a quick interaction on who are the candidates this year, because I feel like we were so focused on if Trump was going to get convicted or on other things, on obviously the Israel-Hamas conflict, that we didn't necessarily stop to actually discuss that. So if you guys are okay, Isaiah and Sage, and maybe later Nadia, when she gets situated. Let's maybe share like who are the candidates and what you think about them, and what can you say in a very simple way for people who don't know anything about US politics?
Hey, oh, so yeah, what did you mean by a junior candidate?
Oh, Kennedy Jr. Isn't there a
Oh,
candidate? Yeah.
I thought you said junior candidate.
Mm.
Yeah, okay,
No.
Kennedy, yes, Kennedy Jr. Okay. Oh my gosh, that's so funny that I thought candidate. It totally works, right? Um, I guess yeah, okay. I guess where he fits into the picture is that um sometimes third party candidates can act as spoilers in an election, right? And the reason that this could trigger people is because it brings up a kind of greater unpredictability in an election that means a lot to different people.
Mhm.
Because some people who really believed in what Donald Trump stood for, they really want to kind of see him like vindicated from all of the legal and political um charges against him, right? And yeah, they may feel that way. And then some people who are for Biden might feel like another Trump presidency would be like literally, dangerous for the earth, American democracy, everything like that, and the rule of law. So it's seen as really high stakes, but at the same time, we have this like electoral system where it's like winner take all in any given state for the most part. So, for example, so if in a state you get like 51% of the votes go to candidate A and 49% go to candidate B. Um, all of the state's electoral votes go to candidate A for that state because candidate A won in that state by a majority. It's not split 51-49, it's winner take all. So that causes issues. In fact, like that's why Donald Trump in 2016 was able to win it all, the presidency, because so he actually lost the popular vote. So fewer people voted for him than voted for Hillary Clinton, right, in 2016. But he barely won, well, not barely, but yeah, he won fairly close races in a few states. And that allowed him to get more electoral votes, even though he got fewer popular votes, like total votes. So people are concerned about something like that happening again, right? And so Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., is that potential wild card in the race because he's a super interesting candidate that comes around in US politics every so often, who kind of is like a middle, some sort of like middle ground or between the two parties, who is willing to like be independent and gets like fairly popular, you know. And there hasn't been anyone who's been like super popular, who's a third party since I think like the 80s. I think Ross Perot was in like the 80s, and I have no idea what he was about. That's like in a history textbook somewhere, and I don't have access to it, so I didn't remember it. But like that's, you know, it's an idea. But every so often, like the two parties that having to make a choice between like two parties, it can irritate people, and so they can feel like we just need someone who isn't this extreme or that extreme or whatever, and someone who's in between. And so that's basically what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has kind of been going for. But the main thrust is um, kind of based on the Kennedy family prestige. It
Right.
kind of harkens back to like the great reviving the old greatness of America while also not being like far right, you know. So it's kind of like between Trump and Biden. And so the one thing to say about this is that okay, so if people don't really know how this is going to go, so we can't really make a prediction. But if in a given state, like let's say a bunch of people who were going to vote for Trump don't like Trump anymore and they vote for RFK, then or more people go to him, like that basically spoils the vote for Trump and it gives the vote to Biden. Or if some Biden voters vote for RFK, it spoils the vote for Biden and could give the whole state to Trump. So that's why people are kind of like, you know, not sure about that. So yeah,
Okay.
that's basically the summary of how that works if for anyone who's not familiar. And it's so interesting how we have these systems in these different countries and why in the US we have this system and all the feelings it brings up and stuff like that. So yeah, that's all. That.
Okay.
What do you feel about that?
So maybe to clarify for someone who really, really, really isn't aware of how it works in the US, or maybe as a reminder, because honestly, like I've done political science and I completely forgot about that, or it went into the back of my mind. So it's always good to have this reminder. Thank you for that. Basically, the vote for a presidential election isn't like a direct vote of the electorate, it's an indirect electorate. This means that people vote, and basically they vote for um, electorate, elected persons in seats, that themselves vote for the winning party, basically, that that was put in place, like the winning party of the state. And that usually does work. but like it's rare to have an indirect electorate for such a big election, basically. And then like you have a very bipartisan system in the US for presidentials, where it's just like it's always been for the 300 years of history, like Democrats and Republicans, even though their ideas and values have changed over time. So basically, for Republicans, it seems like um, everyone wants to basically there are like a large part of their electorate that is Trump supporters. Even though he was convicted, like people really want to see him win, kind of as a revenge of like losing in 2020, and also for the perceived attack that they basically perceive from other people on Trump. And for Democrats, it's more like avoiding a Trump re-election, and obviously like Biden, it's its first mandate. So we are expecting kind of a re-election on that side. So it's very rare that we have a third party that is very strong and could cause like a change or is like making people discuss things. I guess like the last time historically we had like Al Gore in 2000 or something like that. And Kennedy Jr., first of all, like he's got the name um to like kind of support his campaign, which is like it's a neutral thing. Like you can use the power that you already have to do stuff, obviously. And he's got this feeling of like, hey, I just want what's best for America, and what's best for America is like I wish it wouldn't be so extreme, and I want to present something that feels more stable than what we've seen throughout this year, and things like that. And the problem is like people feel very scared about the indirect vote, compared to the popular votes. They feel scared that anything that they can do that deviates from the usual votes, or even like weird like behavioral campaign or not voting, like abstention, like everything can be a risk to put like the country in little danger for a lot of people. And that doesn't necessarily feel good. Like we want to have an election that is not about strategizing, and we want to have an election that is about like the good of people. And if like everything is based on fear, well, I think we've got this just this feeling that hey, maybe we should like avoid it altogether. Maybe we should not look at it and then it get better, or maybe we should just polarize like everybody else and start like a literal war instead of making a conscious, calm choice. And that's what I feel. It feels like it's coming to a head, and it's been coming up to it for a few years. And I think there is really a need to just like step back and say like, hey, power isn't in panicking and being loud. Uh it's in the peace, it's in the actual leadership. And I would love to see that. I see that in all levels of society. So it's no surprise that we also see that in the political range, even though it's kind of sad that our leaders can make like a calm, informed choice. And yeah, that's just how I see things. But I'm curious how you guys see things, how you would respond to my point of view, how Granville feels about this. So yeah, just opening it up for you guys.
So I have a question because it sounds a bit messy, right? So, Sage, I don't know if you said that this would be an independent candidate or if they are backed by either of the parties or standing for either of the parties.
Yeah, I think Yeah, I think he would be an independent because, like, every party is like only allowed to have one nominee, basically. Yeah.
So, what is the value of having an independent that sows further confusion amongst voters?
I guess feeling into it, it kind of feels like, I mean, ultimately, it's an expression that it is a way for people to express to political leaders some sort of like dissatisfaction with the current two parties, or at least the current two candidates. Um, that's all I can really say from it because, like, yeah, like, right, like the independent voting for the third party, um, it amounts to a protest vote most of the time. Like you're basically just saying, I don't agree with any of you, but obviously I know that we're not going to get in power. So, but when it's a really popular third party candidate, they can often have the opposite effect to what they might want. So anyway,
And I think that's where my question is leading. Like,
yeah.
what if, on the off chance, the thing that nobody expected to happen happens, and that independent person does take the majority of the vote in the majority of the states, but they're not backed by a party? How do they then form their government?
Well, you don't need to be backed by a party, to form a government because, like, the the president is elected um, independently from the Senate and the House. So yeah, so you could have, like, theoretically, like, you could have like an independent president, a Democratic majority House, a Republican majority Senate, like all independently elected. So
Oh, that sounds like a fabulous stew.
it's called compromise.
No,
And
no, see, I get it, and the reason why I'm asking, because in South Africa, if you do not have a 50% majority, you can't actually form a government. You have to go into coalition to get a 50%, a 51% majority. So there is then automatically the requirement of cooperation because you have to form a coalition to form a government.
yeah, and that, you know what, that's kind of what would happen in the Senate or in the House. Like, yeah, like, so that's what would happen. Like, if the how can I forget the names of the political parties? If the Democrats got like 49% and the Republicans got 49%, and then there were those 2% was another party, then the Democrats and Republicans would every time or would have to court that 2%. So yeah, they would basically have to form a coalition. But usually that doesn't happen. I don't know if that's ever happened, but yeah, but with the president, it's totally independent of that. So yes,
Okay.
but I don't think a third party candidate could ever win. The only non-major party candidate who ever won was George Washington because that was before political parties existed. And he was so famous and respected that he would, of course, get elected. But he didn't believe in political parties. He thought it would increase division and hostility. So, yeah, that's it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And the reason I'm asking is we've just gone through this foolishness of 1,000,001 little independent parties, which has eroded the power base for the ruling party at the time. And so, where they previously had a 57% majority, they dropped to a 40% majority. So, they have had to go into forming a government of national unity. And it just so happens that the government that they formed, the formation incorporated the party that was probably significantly their opposition in the previous government. So they've kind of had to, that thing that where people say necessity unearths strange bedfellows. So they've had to they've had to kind of form coalitions to keep out the people that nobody wants to work with, which meant that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And
Yeah.
that's been the basis of some of that coalition discussion.
Yeah, and I wonder, and thank you for bringing back to the South African question, or basically like the party that was ruling for a long time now has to form a coalition because they don't have the total majority of the votes. And I'm wondering, as a person that has lived in a country where there has been like a few coalitions, a few a decade, is coalition so bad? Like really, is it so bad? Because like is it like a thing of love where we understand that and realize that politics is really usually just about like fighting on the peace and not realizing that it's a face of the same coin. And there's a lot of healing to having that, or it's just like makes people realize how to best govern. And I know it can feel scary to have like 4 or 5 years of just like maybe a little bit messy, but like wasn't it messy before when we almost had the complete shutdown of the Senate, of the House? Or wasn't it already messy? And isn't there a lesson in love and or victory to have in having a coalition? And I know this may sound very different to a lot of people, but like really, is it so bad? And if it is, like, please tell me because I don't know anything about the difference in politics in your country and um how bad people can fight in a coalition, so much so that it can definitely maybe block a country even more instead of like adding to its flow. And yeah, I just like forming a coalition is a little bit like electing someone to avoid having another person elected that nobody wants, or it would be like a dire situation for them to be in the government. And so it feels like it's a different manifestation of basically the same pattern. And so it feels that as long as we don't heal that at the core, we're going to have several variations of that pattern playing out. And sometimes maybe it's a coalition. Like so just an open question. Obviously like we have no like necessarily good answers about it, but I'd love to hear your point of view and maybe how it would apply in South Africa or the US, in your opinion.
So, offhand, feeling into it, I think it's a decision of maturity more than a decision of love. I don't believe that there's a significant loving core to the partnership, but there is love for the greater majority of the citizens of the country, which has meant that where people would have previously been very stern about their stance, they are being forced to relax that stance, which is beneficial because the one party that was the opposition has a greater track record of delivering or service delivery in a certain part of the country. And so that replication of the capability within the coalition could be very beneficial. The thing that kind of needs to probably be very well managed is that balance of power in decision-making ministerial posts. So there has to be a greater level of power sharing to start delivering the services that the country requires, to bolster the economy, to clean up some of the potential corruption that has happened in the past. So the ruling party, unfortunately, has been the party that has had the most instances of corruption type items surfaced. Rightly or wrongly, I'm not so much on the page of judging that. I'm saying they have been held, that there's a greater space for holding people accountable because they can't contain it within their privacy. They kind of have to, through their coalition charter, plot a way forward, and they have. They've put together quite a tight agreement that will govern how they govern. So I think that it's probably been a decision of maturity that is in the best interest of the country, because the parties that had won certain amounts of votes, if they were allowed into certain roles, it would have probably eroded even more of the value sitting in those various ministerial positions.
So what I hear is like it's more of a lesson of love and a choice of love, and I can understand that for sure. Nadia, are you able to talk? And if so, do you have an opinion on this?
I'm wondering if this next move of bringing two parties together as a coalition is allowing South Africa to evolve to more harmony, because now they will have to find that balance in order to address concerns that come up in both of those parties. Do you feel that way as well?
So the thing that's beneficial is that it is 30 years since the previous government of national unity, and that was formed at the time to manage the transition into democracy. So it was literally a shift in the power base, and the only way to ensure that there wasn't the significant unrest that was being predicted was for power sharing. This time around, within a democracy, the public has said, well, none of you deserve our outright support. So in that instance, some of you will have to work together to best serve us. So I do believe that it is allowing for a transition in South Africa that will probably see greater alignment at a national level amongst people, because the parties that they voted for enough so that they have significant amounts of votes, but not significant amounts of votes to create an outright individual party majority. There has to be a power sharing process.
Yeah, and I feel that power sharing process is a good thing. If anything, we can learn and evolve in the US about power sharing, especially in that House of Representatives.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know, like, if we could say, like, can we like look at side by side, like how it feels when there have to be like coalitions in government versus how it feels when there are just like two parties, and like one or the other pretty much always has a majority. I feel like the coalition one, it does feel a little bit less overall. It feels a little bit less it doesn't I could be totally wrong about this, but let's just say it just to create a discussion to help find the truth. It feels like the coalition government system would create less of a sense of people feeling upset by, oh, this is unfair, oh, I don't feel heard. Like, I feel like it helps people feel heard, because it's like, well, this party has like 40% and this party has 20% or whatever, and they came together and they worked something out. And I feel like then maybe more people would feel heard on different issues, but I haven't studied this, so I don't really know. But and then in a system like we have in the US, where there are just two parties for some reason, and it pretty much always shakes out that like one has a majority over the other, unless, like, I feel like people might feel more sense of like, oh, I'm not feeling heard, or like I'm feeling resentful at this other party because they're kind of like calling all the shots just because they're like 1 percentage point greater, in the government than we are. And so it kind of creates more backlash. It kind of feels that way, but I'm not really sure. But I think maybe it feels a little more streamlined, because you don't have to like have this big discussion, this big back and forth between like, oh, this party wants this party wants that, how are we going to agree? It's more just like, for most cases, like, I mean, there's still that in both systems, right? But I don't know if, do you feel that, Granville, like being in and yeah, they have that system in France too, don't they? Kind of.
So I agree with you. I definitely believe that the requirement to form a coalition is less polarizing, because you don't only have the two ideologies and kind of have to pick the lesser of the supposed two evils kind of thing. This is much more a requirement, whether it's, and unfortunately it might be construed as forced cooperation, but at the same time, there has to be a level of alignment for forward movement. And so, yes, there can be a rigorous debate, but at some point, the rigorous debate kind of needs to be laid to rest in order for movement to take place. So I definitely feel like with these parties coming closer together, there is going to be less of a sentiment of resentment, because I'm not forced to accept something that was this or that. They're probably going to have to find a much closer middle ground. Well, that's the hope anyway. I would hope that they find a much closer middle ground that sees both of them cementing their position in terms of delivery, in terms of policy, in terms of actually lifting the country up to the level that it needs to go to. And yes, they're not going to have a magic wand that's going to change it overnight, but the cooperation might just shift it in a direction sooner than if there was permanent opposition all the time.
I do agree with that sense, but there needs to be a little bit of a minimum of desire for alignment between the parties for this to work. But that's something that we can't necessarily predict, and that's how we get to let the lesson unfold. Unfortunately, like, I don't think a coalition, even though I was the one posing the question, I don't think a coalition is going to work quite as well, maybe or maybe not, in France compared to South Africa, and I think honestly even less in the US. and I'm going to explain why. And I think it may work in South Africa because this is a parliament-based government. Problem in the US is that it is presidential-based government. And so sometimes it feels like, even though sometimes we feel like the presidentials are more important in South Africa and especially in France, like it's still a parliament government and they try to block the president sometimes. Like most of their energy is exposed on making deals and making laws, right? It still happens in the United States, but it also feels like the core is like, are we going to support the president completely, or are we going to vote against him? And I think the indirect electorate also brings that energy in there, which is a little bit, it doesn't quite feel right sometimes because it feels like it's a little bit detached from the people. Nonetheless, like there was like basically a lot of things pointing to the parliament is going to block a president if they're not from the same majority, say like Obama in his second mandate. And also like if there is like not a majority, I'm hoping this can solve some problems, but I also don't want to see people not making decisions and pushing the parliament to another shutdown, the government to another shutdown, because they can't make a decision. However, that's not something that we can predict. I gotta let this play out. Like we can do a lot of foreshadowing about that, but like we don't know exactly how this is going to play out. I just hope that the government shutdown that we almost faced last year is not something that we're ever going to repeat. But again, that's like we need to learn this as a collective lesson. We're not going to learn this by trying to strategize into who's going to be in parliament. We're going to learn this by really healing this pattern of just letting things rot and not really valuing the way we I guess work for the people. And I think that's at the core of this. That coalition in and on itself is not going to either crash down or save the country. And I think that's what the fear of and the paralyzing that we felt in the United States election maybe was pointing at, and what people believe. But like the choice to really say like, okay, we want to align, like basically creating a love list, like Chrissy would say. Um, it's like we want a government, no matter what side, no matter what independent or non-party it is. We want someone who's able to make decisions, make informed decisions, listen to us, and things like that. And we really need to get we've talked a lot about this, but I think we need now to get precise about what we desire here. And exactly like a twin flame, you don't desire like a physical person, don't desire a charismatic person. We have to trust that what we desire is deeper than that, and that desire is going to bring a person that is good. And so in order to make an informed choice, I would like invite people to really be precise about what they want for their country, just like what they want for a house or a relationship. And I think I'm going to do that tonight too. Pick for my country because like there is a little bit of things going on that we can talk about right after I finish this. Um, and and I think it's important to just like, we're not going to make informed decisions just by looking out to media and what they say about people. We need to make sure in ourselves first without seeking necessarily the validation or the strategization of someone else. And I bet that can be a conclusion to a lot of the problem that we've been talking about for 40 minutes. And And maybe you agree with this, or maybe you feel like there's another decision to make.
I see what you mean, Yurine, and I can definitely resonate with even the US having two parties that represent the people. It still isn't fully one size fit all. And that love list that you were talking about is really great to represent individual, but also seeing how in South Africa, this is such a new way of evolving. The healing that's going to come up from the upsets of this will allow for more understanding of what we need in order to have more of a inclusivity. And just like the teachings of union, how we saw in each corner in every aspect, it's very one size fit all, and it's very accommodating to all religions. We can make that with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights by moving through our upsets and seeing what's working and what's not working.
Mm-hmm.
I think you raised quite an important point in terms of the love list, because creating that love list probably takes you out of the space of sitting in the complaint and the upset, right? So as opposed to permanently feeling like you're not being seen or heard or any of those other wonderful things, it's more taking the power back to specify what you actually do want in your reality. And so I definitely believe that there's power in writing out that desire, but that desire probably needs to be quite specific and must not be written from a space of I want. It must almost be written from the space of this is already a reality. So my country looks like this. My country operates in this way. And I think that starts to also settle your desire, because you're actually calling in the thing that you truly wish was so already.
Yeah, definitely. I love what you said. Like it was a very it summarized everything in a very good way, and I think was a good indicator for everyone, like people that have never done a love list, on how to do that. Isaiah, did you want to add something to that? I thought you guys were reaching for a button. All right, so to finish this discussion today, I'd like to talk about something that happened during the past 2 weeks over in Europe. So this was the European Union elections, and it was a little bit upsetting for more than one people. I thought it was upsetting for me, first of all, because I knew how important it would be. Like, I think a lot of people don't understand how important the European Union is in terms of like making decisions for healthcare, climate change, and other social things. And obviously they don't have all the power, but they have power to like digital protection, but also digital block-offs as well in terms of democracy. So I don't think we'll realize how much the European Union has power over like how the democracy is going to be organized. And I wanted to be at this election, but my train was super, super late. And so I never got the chance to vote. And it like I don't know if it would have changed anything, because like far-right movements were the ones that were in leadership in so many countries. I think it is no surprise because it's been on the rise for many years, and obviously like the people that are going to vote are people that feel concerned about this. So people that would like someone someone as an outsider to be elected. That's the same thing that happened with Trump in 2016. That's the same thing that will continue to happen if people like don't realize like how important it is to vote. However, the night of the election, Emmanuel Macron made an address saying that he was dissolving part of the parliament, like the main part of parliament, so yes, National Assembly, in order to remake a vote, and this vote is like June 30th. June the 30th. And you know, he's in his right. Like I think it's never happened before in this republic, like this system that we have since 1958. I'm not certain. I don't think it's ever happened. But he has a right to do that. However, many people are upset because they fear that it's going to give even more of a voice to the far right movements because like a lot of people, even like people of color, people over in the French Caribbean, they vote far right in mass because they think that it's a war against the current government and that this war against the current government must be fought by um voting for someone that is very different. And I think it gets close to what Sage was saying about expressing dissatisfaction by voting for a third party. However, this we are actually truly at risk of putting our democracy in danger more than we want to by wanting to elect these people. And yeah, that's just like how this is going. I feel when I was in the United States and I was discussing that with Fabian because he was asking like what's going on in France. I felt not too worried about that. I felt like a lot of people were actually choosing stability, and that's why Emmanuel Macron was elected again and again, even though people were very, I don't know, cross with him. And I do think still now that even though he's not doing things perfectly, he's at least doing things. And that's very different from people that were all talked before but did nothing, first of all. And I think he genuinely has this sense of like he'd rather be seen as a villain, but someone who does things to make the country move than a good person but doesn't do anything. I think he really is in it for I have nothing to lose. Sometimes, like it doesn't mean that it doesn't do mistakes. I feel it does do mistakes, but he overall like I mean the country has been like fairly stable for the amount of crisis that we've had over the past few years. And yeah, I think maybe it's like showing us a part of politics that we should pay more attention to. And far right movements are showing like kind of this veneer, this illusion of like we can change things, but actually when you look at their program, like they just wanted um to keep their interests. And yeah, that's just what's going on. Obviously, I know the European Union and France, like it doesn't really, it seems like very far from what you're used to, but I was wondering from the summary that I tried to do right now, like if you had any thoughts about this, things that were coming up and maybe even like parallels that you're drawing with your own situation in your own countries. So I'm curious to know what you think.
So my question is, and you mentioned that the European Union has quite significant power to influence things. But obviously, the sovereignty of each participating nation is still sacrosanct. So they have the power to influence it, but the influence only extends to as far as that sovereign nation is prepared to implement it. Are there any mechanisms within the European Union that can sometimes compel movement in a collective direction?
Mechanisms that like compel movement and I'm guessing like first of all there is a level where certain laws, like for example laws on agricultures and levels of certain chemicals in our food or digital protection and environment, like some of these laws are done in the European Union level. So these are things that call for an action that is unified. Then there's another level where you have security and democracy, where it's voted by the European Union, and then it's up to the country to apply it in their country, and you get a lot of like sanctions if you don't apply the values and rules of European Union, because why would you be in a relationship if you don't apply it, right? And then there is an entirely different institution, so not the one that was in this election, that just is here to make sure that the level of democracy that this country is showing is on par with the values that we have in the European Union. And sometimes that isn't the case. Like, for example, like in 2019, France got several warnings because they felt like the demonstrations that happened all over the year and the way it was handled by the government weren't on par with democracy. And that's kind of that's kind of what it is. So that other institution will probably have things to say when forward movements make decisions for the countries, but like there is like, if agriculture and climate change and digital protection are changed even more than it is now, we may come into an era of like kind of separation with the rest of the world, which we don't want, and which obviously the Nationalist Party wants because it will help them kind of, control immigration. And yeah, I hope that's clear. It's not easy institutions to kind of dissect in a few minutes, but it can help to understand like the different levels and relationships we have with them.
So something else that you mentioned that I was curious to understand was you said that there was potential for France's democracy to be under threat. Can you unpack that one a little bit more?
Well, people are scared that France's democracy is going to be under threat. That's not, I think that I'm not totally sold on that yet, but like basically June 30th is where the new parliament elections are taking place, at least like the first week of parliament elections. And people are just thinking that if far rights won, even though there was like 45% of participation in the European Union elections, well, it means that they won by a landslide and we're going to win by a landslide the parliament elections too. And that Macron didn't make the right choice there. And basically, everyone is fighting over on social media, saying that far rights are trying to block the electoral system in some regions and things like that. And so I think like there's a lot of I honestly feel like there's a lot of fear mongering that can only be healed by being very powerful in your own individual choices and decisions, right? We can't keep trying to influence by trying to plead for people to do their rights, to do their duty as citizens. Like we must attend them in another way where it is like, all right, what do you choose? And are you aware of the responsibility that you have in your choice? And and how to remove the complaints, basically what you said for Loveless. Remove the complaints and replace it by power. And yeah, I guess that's where people feel like democracy is on the threat and there's a lot of fear, and that's basically the solution that I hope we can talk about right now. Yeah. So does that feel a little bit clearer? How do you guys feel about all of that? Nadia, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was trying to get a little bit more clear thinking about the current events that were happening in France and what would lead to this type of decision from the government in
Yeah.
France. And I'm thinking that, we talked about how there were attacks in Paris due to such a political uprising. And you would think that it would be a call to be more democratic, more open for others to feel welcome, as to prevent people to feel unsafe and to prevent these attacks. But rather, it's like there's like a clinging on to that fear and resisting even more, instead of like opening the heart, closing the heart more and thinking that that's what's going to help. But really, this is not at all.
Sage, do you want to say something?
Oh no. Yeah, I just want to hear what you have to say about that. And yeah,
Yeah.
still wasn't clear about though the far right threat to democracy thing. Like if they were like kind of like Trump, how Trump was saying like he's gonna like politically prosecute people and like become a dictator and like all that kind of
Yeah, it's pretty much
standards.
the same. Like it looks different, but it's pretty much the same everywhere. It's just that they have their own party, and so it's very clear that they anti a certain immigration, and they really want to like be for themselves, like make the country as secluded as it can be, um, even at the cost of like the country's stability. And yeah, it's funny because like they won in the European Union election because they knew that there wasn't a lot of participation. They could win if they were like very patient there, but most far-right parties are anti the European Union, even though it brings a lot of advantages and economic fairness to us. So it's a little bit like we see that it's very much I'm making a party for me and for people that look like me rather than a party for that actually cares about the people. And so I'm hoping that it can like give you a little bit of clarity on like how it can resemble like people like Trump, even though it's not exactly the same, right? And so to kind of answer to Nada's question, yes, I'm feeling very much that on every level of society and leadership right now, there is kind of challenging things happening. Challenging things that can be really resolved by stepping into a calm and peaceful leadership. But people are kind of choosing to panic and to fear instead of saying like, okay, we have the power to do that. So they're really relinquishing their power to something else. They're feeling powerless even though they have power in this situation. And so it's our duty to be compassionate with them and just guide them the best we can. So I'm just wondering, like, I personally have that situation at work right now. So I invite you, if you ever encounter that situation in any way, shape or form this week and in the weeks to come in your daily life, to demonstrate to people that you can have power by being peaceful and you don't have to panic, you don't have to project, and that's just like what maybe we can bring to daily life of people right now, even though like we cannot bring it to the whole entire political systems at this moment. And let's start making a change there. And if you feel good about that, yes, Nadia.
Yeah, it reminded me of a comment Jeff made today about the illusion of attack, and thinking that if we stand with love and we see this opportunity to continue to stand with love, even if that illusion is growing stronger and stronger, it still concludes to love winning. Like, even one person standing in love and there's 100 like coming with the illusion, that fact that love is still standing strong is what's gonna cause us to have victory.
Very good. Very good closing words. And with that, I'm going to say that's all that we have today. Thank you to everyone that watched us and participated into our live discussion, and thank you to everyone who's watching us from YouTube. If you would like to see more of these discussions happening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and maybe share a little bit of your experiences and what we would like us to talk about in the next few weeks. And I wish you a very good day and see you soon. Bye-bye.